Order. Mr. Thorney, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Gorski, roll call, please.
Ms. Arminio.
Here.
Mr. Braverman.
Here.
Ms. DeMayo.
Here.
Mr. Kaufman.
Here.
Mrs. Kolpanowicz.
Here.
Mr. Nostine.
Here.
Mr. Poi.
Here.
Mr. Prezioso.
Here.
Mr. Ryback.
Here.
Mr. Zarneski.
Here.
Mr. Board President, you have a quorum this evening. In accordance with the provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law, the Monroe Township Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted April 17th, 2015 at all schools, the Home News Tribune, Cranberry Press, and filed with the clerk of the municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Gorski. At this time, Mr. Thorney, will you give us the student report?
Thank you, Mr. Poi. Good evening, members of the board and of the public. Given the recent board meeting, my report will be fairly brief tonight. Some of the elementary schools within the district have organized collections for the Middlesex County Food Bank. Also, in order of Autism Awareness Month, schools across the district have been organizing activities, including fundraiser opportunities. Barclay Brook and Brookside Elementary Schools held a variety show on April 24th at the Middle School's Performing Arts Center. The Monroe Township High School Drama Club had recently put on a production of Young Frankenstein, running from this past Thursday through yesterday in the high school's Performing Arts Center that was open to the community as a whole. Students currently enrolled in advanced placement courses will be participating in the AP exam testing during the month of May. Now, I know Mr. Goodall gave a brief presentation about the AP courses and opportunities last meeting, so I'm not going to take a long time to address this. However, these course offerings further prepare students for college, allow us to further challenge ourselves, and allow us to possibly earn college credit and or advanced standing in terms of introductory courses in post-secondary education. And it is it's a very fortunate opportunity that we have these courses at the high school, and I know that all of us who are currently taking or have taken AP courses are very appreciative of this opportunity. Additionally, some students in the high school have been able to qualify for the DECA International Career Development Conference, where these students are competing in the next step of their competitive events in business, finance, and marketing related categories. Seminars and keynote speaker events are also taking place as well at this conference. Finally, Monroe students in the New Jersey Youth in Government program had recently attended the annual conference from Friday through yesterday, Sunday, April 16th. The program serves as a mock simulation of the state government and state politics, where students have the opportunity or have participated in the legislative program, the judicial program, the executive branch, press, lobby corps, or the executive response committee. This program primarily took place at the State House, which we have the privilege to utilize. And there were also some guest speakers, including United States Congressman Donald Payne Jr. And former New Jersey Governor Christy Todd Whitman. And that concludes the Student Board Members' report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thorney. We'll be going to the first public forum, but before doing that, I would just like to remind anyone coming to the microphone that this part of the public forum is restricted to what is on the agenda this evening. Any participant coming to the microphone should give their name and place of residence. Your statement should not exceed 3 minutes, and you're asked to speak no more than once on the same topic. All statements are to be directed to the presiding officer, and addressing or questioning individual members of the board is not permitted. We will be having a presentation on the budget for next year immediately after the public forum, And you will have an opportunity at that time to also ask questions. So please keep that in mind if you wish to speak. Do we have anyone wishing to comment or question the agenda tonight? All right, I see no one interested in that, so we will move on to the public budget hearing and the final adoption. Mr. Gorski?
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. Since the preliminary budget hearing, where the public was introduced to the tentative 15-16 school budget, the Board of Education had 9 members and 1 abstention on passing the tentative budget resolution. There's an opportunity between the preliminary budget hearing and tonight's final adoption for changes to be made or recommended to the Finance Committee. And I'm pleased to announce that there were none. I take that as a reflection of the hard work that all the stakeholders had in the preparation of this year's budget, from the school levels where everything was zero-based from scratch. Literally, the teachers and the principals and the vice principals started with an empty shopping cart, making determinations what they needed for next year by inventorying their supply cabinets, by providing for an additional 267 new students that we anticipate next year. We had some favorable aspects to this budget. Our energy projections that are done by professionals are significantly down from the prior year. Ratables were also very favorable, and that's another indication of the growth that we're experiencing in the township. Ratable growth helps a real significant downward push on taxes. And therefore, the information that is posted on our website, including the user-friendly budget for the 15-16 school year, a summary of revenues, that's a comparative summary to last year, a summary of appropriations, PowerPoint presentations, all of which is much more than the law requires. We try to be as open and as transparent and invite the public's input into the budget process as possible. All of that remains tonight unchanged. And the result of the budget, by going to cap, which is required for not only to educate the new students, but also to do a major construction project at the high school, the Monroe Township Middle School, is the reasons why we have to go to cap. The consequence on taxes is a 4.5-cent increase, which is $138.44 on the average assessed home. And as we mentioned in the last meeting, had it not been for direct appropriations attributable to student growth, the growth of the budget by itself would be 2.6 cents or $81.76 on the average assessed home of $309,000, which is provided by the township. So this budget provides for all the needs of the growing student body, addresses our aging facilities, and does so in a very tax responsible manner. And that said, and also because there were no changes from the preliminary, I'll turn it over to the board, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to entertain.
Thank you, Mr. Gorski. First of all, are there any questions from any members of the board? Mr. Nasreen?
I just want to thank Mr. Gorski for all his hard work. The budget is, I feel, a very tight budget, and we have to work within the constraints that we have, namely the 2% cap. To do what we're doing, I think it's $1.9 million, expansion at the middle school with 5 classrooms. To do that and take in an anticipated 267 students, all without having to go out for a referendum is quite remarkable in my opinion. So I want to thank you for that. My next question, though, is what is the next step now? Does this go to the county, or has it already gone there, or just is there any other timeline, or this is just it?
Good question. As indicated, for the public's benefit, we have a budget timeline, which is on the website also. I forgot to mention that before. Tonight is the final budget adoption. After tonight, assuming that I have the majority of the members in support of the adoption, I will then transmit the budget again to the county office with the certified resolution tonight passing the budget. And then we will wait for an electronic communication from the county office that the final budget is approved. Now, being that there have not been any changes from the final, from the preliminary, and the preliminary was approved very quickly for advertising with the compliments of the county office, I expect that turnaround time to be very quick. And then we can begin the process of posting the budget in the accounting system, begin the purchase orders for the construction project at the middle school that you mentioned, because a lot of things like doors and windows have a lead time, and also begin the arduous process of staffing.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, how about the public? Any members of the public? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Arminio?
Mr. Gorski, just for just a reiteration and for the public's understanding, when we go to CAP, there are some things that when we get a higher enrollment, does that change the calculation of the CAP?
Yes. Last year, the state gave us an additional $13,000 of growth to the CAP because of enrollment. It's an automatic budget adjustment. This year, it was more material than we had anticipated, and that comes from the state's trend line analysis of our enrollment.
Right, but
And that's very hard to anticipate ahead of time.
right, but what the state gives us is 13,000. That doesn't translate into something even for us. It still costs us more money for the more students we enroll. Is that correct?
Yes. It costs us more money, yes, because the way the tax levy cap works is you take your preceding year general fund tax levy, you then adjust it for an automatic enrollment increase that's calculated by the state. You then multiply it by 2%, increasing it for the next year, and then you're allowed a health insurance update. Those are the adjustments that are applicable to Monroe. Generally, that would take a 2% cap to about a 3% cap with those adjustments. But that does not offer any relief for Monroe because, of course, then that requires you to raise a higher levy to support the schools. What we've talked about our need being all along was more state aid, more equitable state aid funding.
But also the increase in the development over in the community itself has increased our enrollment sort of exponentially, a lot more than surrounding areas. We're getting almost 200 children a year in the last few years, correct?
Yes, the demographer calculated 267 new students expected for next year, and that's material.
And that actually goes to, when we say new sections, there, if people look at the agenda, and I'm not necessarily on this one, but in the past when it says new sections being added, what that means is like a new classroom, right?
That's
And
exactly correct.
And we have to hire teachers and sometimes
That's correct.
paras and additional, and that increases our position in terms of our budgeting issues.
Yes, ma'am.
And just one more thing, we're actually not, because of some of the things that are not involved in the cap, we actually are going beyond the 2%, right?
It's going slightly above 2% because of the enrollment adjustment, which again is automatic, and a health care cost adjustment.
And that was due to our most recent contract negotiations, is that correct, in 2014?
That's part of it. Health insurance is a budget all by itself, and it's a process that we engage in starting in December, where we get the preliminary rates from Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield, and as we mentioned, they control 70% of the New Jersey marketplace, and it's basically take it or leave it. The board changed health insurance brokers 2 years back, and we've had much more leverage with the new broker negotiating with Horizon. This year, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield projected initially a 16% increase in our premiums. That's on a $20 million account, so that's substantial. That's almost our full growth of the budget by itself. We negotiated that down with the broker's help down to 8, and then with the staff's contributions, which are a fruit of negotiations, that 8% dropped down to about 2.8, a very manageable increase for a budget our size.
And then just one more comment about, you've renegotiated some loans, some bonds. Is that savings in the 2015, 2016 budget, or part of that savings?
Part of that savings is, yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry to
I
ask.
believe the figure that I gave to the Finance Committee was that saves about $200,000 a year in interest costs. And it will do so for the next 20 years. And these two series that we just refunded recently saves about $3.5 million on a net present value basis.
Over time.
Yes, over the 20-year duration of the bonds.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else from the board? Mr. Prezioso?
Michael, what was the amount to be paid by the taxpayer? What was that increased by? You can give me a percentage.
Taxes for the general fund are increasing 3.88%. $3,449,000, 3.88%. Taxes for the debt service fund is substantially higher because, as I mentioned at the preliminary meeting, last year we appropriated $2.5 million of bond surplus to reduce what otherwise would have to be raised in the debt service budget. With that fund and that surplus extinguished, there was only $275,000 of surplus remaining for it to be closed out. So there was a need this year to raise more to the normal amount for the debt service fund without that stimulus coming from bond surplus.
The amount in the budget paid by the taxpayer increased 6.5% this year?
Beg your pardon?
The amount of the budget to be paid by the taxpayer increased 6.5%?
In the aggregate for the two funds, that is exactly correct.
Is that because of the bond? We have no...
Yes, it's a disparity in the comparison, which is unfair comparing this year to last year, because again, last year, you reduced the amount that you would have to raise from the taxpayers by $2.5 million. This year, you could only reduce it by $275,000. So although that shows a substantial increase, this was planned for all along, and it has coincided with the ratable normalization in town and the growth, which offset that. So we have a linear tax increase year to year, and we don't wind up with these spikes.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, comments or questions from members of the public?
Robert Roach, 18 Muirfield Boulevard. As Mrs. Arminia was talking about the 2% cap, and as Mr. Gorski just indicated, the general fund did increase by 3.88%, which is almost double the 2% cap. So the 2% cap is sort of a non-entity type of thing. But one of the things that I found a little concerning, and I recognize that it had an issue because of the bonds, the monies from bonds being used for debt service. But the tax rate has increased this year 7.67%. And that's really difficult for some of the older people that are on Social Security in this community. And I really do feel that it's incumbent upon the board, when they're looking at the budget, to consider the income level of certain people in this area. And, you know, many of us can afford it, but there's many that can't. So, you know, you're really putting some people really in tough financial straits. And, I mean, I know the budget's going to be improved and all that kind of stuff, but going forward, I really think you have to consider this. And I know you have a tough job trying to balance the educational needs with the people who are paying it. And I know the whole problem is the state not giving the funding. And I don't know what's going to happen with the funding, whether we're going to get what's promised because of the whole problem with the pension funds, and so the state may just say, hey, we're going to cut down some of this funding and put more money in the pension funds, and we may be getting less than we're even anticipating. So it's a really difficult problem, but there's a lot of people that are really having difficult times making ends meet.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Roach. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no other people coming up to the podium, I will now close the public session. And Mr. Gorski, you have a resolution to read?
Yes, thank you. This resolution is for the adoption of the 2015-2016 school budget. It is recommended that the members of the Monroe Township Board of Education approve the following amounts and resolution for the 15-16 final budget. Be it resolved by the Monroe Township Board of Education that the 2015-16 final general fund budget be adopted in the amount of $103,725,261 and a final general fund local tax levy in the amount of $92,308,645, inclusive of the allowable adjustment for health care costs of $240,632, and a final special revenue fund in the amount of $1,111,993, and a final debt service budget in the amount of $10,822,666, and a final debt service local tax levy in the amount of $9,863,973, whereby the final 2015-16 budget totals $115,659,920. And whereas the Monroe Township Board of Education has been notified of state aid amounts, and whereas such state aid amounts are, for the 2015-16 budget, categorical special education aid is $2,048,517, and for the 15-16 categorical security aid is $92,501, and for the 15-16 categorical transportation aid is $496,510, and for the 15-16 debt service aid is $679,742, and for the 15-16 other state aid consisting of park readiness aid of $58,980 and per pupil grant aid of $58,980. And whereas the Monroe Township Board of Education has estimated a state aid amount pursuant to application, and for 2015-16 the estimated extraordinary aid amount is $214,453. And whereas the state's failure to fully fund the School Refunding Form Act of 2008, as well as other factors, has provided insufficient financial support for programs and services contained in the base budget, necessitating the application of $239,989 of unused spending authority to be included in the base budget, and that said needs will be completed by the end of the budget year, will not be deferred or incrementally completed over a longer time. And whereas the school district bylaw 0147, policy 3440, policy 4440, and NJAC 6A:23B-1.2b provides that the Board of Education shall establish in the annual school budget a maximum expenditure amount that may be allotted for such travel and expense reimbursement for the 2015-16 school year. Now therefore be it resolved that the Monroe Township Board of Education hereby establishes the school district travel maximum for the 2015-16 school year at the final sum of $158,422, and be it further resolved that the school business administrator shall track and record these costs to ensure that the maximum amount is not exceeded. And there now for let it be resolved that the superintendent of schools and the business administrator board secretary file the required documents with the executive county superintendent.
So moved.
Second.
So moved. Second.
First, Kathy Koloponich, second by Mr. Nostine.
Any further questions or discussion by members of the board? Okay, we'll then go to a roll call vote.
Ms. Arminio.
Before I vote, I just want to make a small mention of recognizing the enormity of the budget and how difficult it might be to get everything in order, I still think that we're reaching a tipping point in our community in consideration of people in the community who in some cases can't afford to pay the taxes and are moving out. In my business, I've seen people in my career of 30 years, I have not seen so many people buying down real estate as they've had to in the last few years since the last recession. And the recession isn't over for most people. So it's been a very difficult decision for me. I'm going to say yes to the budget. However, I would like my colleagues to really consider when we do our goals in August, to consider our spending habits and certainly not hurt the children in any way, but I think there are things we need to review a little bit more diligently. But yes, and I hope we can control the budget a little better next year. Thank you.
Mr. Braverman.
The truncated version of this vote is yes.
Mr. Zarneski.
Yes.
Ms. DeMayo.
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman.
Yes.
Mrs. Cole-Panowich. Mr. Nostine.
Yes,
Mr. Prezioso.
I agree with Michelle, but only I'll vote no.
So noted. Mr. Ryback.
Yes.
Mr. Poi.
Yes.
Mr. Board President, adoption of the 15-16 budget passes, and I would like to thank all the board members for their contributions to this budget. It was a very difficult process beginning with the budget philosophy meeting over last summer. We've had many good finance committee meetings where a lot was discussed, and I believe this to be a very responsible budget, one where we have really cut to the bone as much as possible, anticipating the 267 new students. That is, again, a half a school worth of new students coming next year, and with a tax rate that is below the median. And thanks to Mr. Ventrilo and Dr. Alvich for their contributions as well. Thank you, sir.
Clearly, it isn't easy to put together a budget for our district in light of our growing enrollments and the lack of outside aid. And I do commend our administration for being conscious of those demands in terms of the process. And I voted yes because I do feel that looking at the particulars of the budget, it was about as good as we could expect to do. I understand the sentiments of Mrs. Arminio that it would certainly be nice if we could find some way to reduce expenditures with the demands, particularly at the middle school, of the construction we're having to do there, and not having a referendum, a separate referendum to cover that. I think we're rather fortunate that we can provide for those changes to accommodate the children in the middle school within that budget. At this time, we're going to have a discussion of the one-to-one instructional initiative. I believe this was the recommendation of the Finance Committee at last week's meeting. I'm not sure who would like to begin to comment on that. The one-to-one initiative, essentially, for purposes of the public, it refers to having a computerized device. Presently, it's the iPad. For each student in the high school that they are using in an instructional capacity. This is now, we're wrapping up, I believe, the 4th year of that initiative, if I'm not mistaken. And so we need to make a determination as to what direction we'll be moving in for next year and possibly subsequent years. So anyone wishing to make a comment on this particular topic? Mr. Nostine?
I'd like to start off, first of all, I have a question. In the presentation that we were given at the finance, and I believe it was given at the curriculum also, the price of the individual iPads are $498. Does that include the AppleCare of $99?
Let me just interrupt before we get an answer to that. Mr. Washington, could you join us at the table over here? Because I'm sure that we're going to need your expertise in answering some of these questions. And Mr. Thorney, could you possibly pass that microphone over so that it'll be convenient for Mr. Washington?
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like that question repeated?
Yes, sir.
Okay, could you repeat
I'm sorry. I know we're showing the iPads cost at $498 each. Does that cost include the $99 of Apple Care per unit?
Yes, sir, it does.
It does. Okay, that's great. I have big concerns with this idea of a 3-year life cycle. I am definitely on board. I feel that the one-to-one initiative is the way to go. However, we also have to keep in mind that $1.6 million every 3 years is very, very expensive for our taxpayers. What I would like to see, or actually like to ask you, is there any way that we can reuse any of these? I know there were some concerns about damaged power buttons on some of these. I went online and it's a $60 repair for a button. It's $190 for a glass screen, $85 for a charger port repair, $65 for a front camera repair, $80 for a battery replacement, and $85 for a volume button. Now, it seems to me that if that is the primary problems that we're experiencing with these existing ones, that if we could go through and take maybe 50% and hold on to them, only purchase another 1,000 going forward for the next year, service the ones if they need servicing, I believe we would still be ahead of the game at that point. And if you're telling me that there are none that are serviceable, then I almost have to say, are we looking at the right platform? Because to me, a 3-year life expectancy is just not acceptable in our situation. It gets very costly, and I have to think that it's just not a good platform at that point. So I was just wondering what some of your thoughts are, Mr. Washington.
Concerning the 3-year lifespan, that's simply has been our experience with the iPad. If you're asking me how many of them will be serviceable after this year, I won't know that until we collect them at the end of the year. Historically, we find that when we collect the iPads at the end of the year, 25% of them have the cracked screens. And many of the kids continue to use them because they don't want to be assessed that penalty of $50 to repair it. So I don't know how many will be serviceable. What I do know is the iPads that we issued out this year, we thought they were in good working order, but by the time many of the students started using them, they would report to us that the home button wasn't working or the digitizer wasn't working. And it just appeared to me that the lifespan of the iPad is about 3 years. Beyond that, I don't see the device as being something that I could stand in front of teachers and say, I can guarantee you that that device is going to work. There's only 3 buttons on the iPad: the home button, the on-off button, and the volume button. So those 3 moving parts wear out. And that's what I have seen from the 4 years of experience with the iPad.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that, and that does make sense that those would be the parts that wear out, but when you hear that it's only, $80 for a power button repair versus $498 for a new unit, and to me, that's the advantage of sticking with the platform that we're on. If we only wanted to replace 75% of them, we can do that because we're not looking for new functionality in the new platform. We're basically duplicating what we have. We're not gaining anything other than, obviously the iPad Airs are small, a little quicker, but that's not the big issue here. The big issue is the non-serviceability of the existing iPads.
Sir.
That's accurate, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. And I know that we did negotiate this deal, but I mean, even without just a regular consumer going online, we can get an iPad Air for $449. So to say that the iPad, with the Mac Air is roughly $100 a unit, it's not like a fantastic deal when you're buying 2,200 of these. My other concern is on the teacher side. We're buying 200 MacBook Pros and 200 iPad Airs for the teachers. Now, if any of the units should be in pristine shape, it should be the faculty's. So I don't understand why we just can't say, okay, again, we're on the same platform. Why can't we just keep the MacBook and the iPads existing for the faculty? That would save 200. And I would like to possibly see or look into what are the chances of negotiating a 4-year Apple Care with Apple?
We can certainly look into negotiating a 4-year Apple Care protection plan to see if that's even offered. But as far as the MacBooks themselves, the teacher's current MacBook, that unit's no longer manufactured, which makes it very difficult to get parts for it. In addition to that, much of the training that we do with Apple is geared towards the current product. So there are some things the new MacBook can do that the old one simply can't do. So when the teachers are going through their professional development, it puts some challenges in front of them because the machines that they have, which are 4 years old now and will be 5, but we've decided to keep them going into next year, there will be some functionality that it will not be able to do.
But if the person doing the PD knows that, he just wouldn't train them on that section of it.
That's correct. We will have to inform them ahead of time, and
Right.
they'll have to tailor the training to Monroe.
So, I mean, that's pretty much all I have. Like I said, I think the iPad initiative is a great thing, but I have to really question when I hear that we're having servicing issues already, and the units are only 3 years old. I have to question, is that the best choice for our students and our teachers if we're having service issues only after 3 years? Thank you.
Mrs. Arminio?
Mr. Notstein pointed out something, and Mr. Washington, when you said this, it sort of also made an impression on me, the current product. I mean, I suppose any technology that we get, that would all be an issue, but it seems that we will always be behind the 8 ball and not always having the current product. I mean, it's almost like a planned obsolescence in technology that companies, especially big ones, and I'm not disparaging the choice, I'm just trying to figure out if it's our best choice. If these products become obsolete fashion, I mean, I would like to see something like 4 years, because that's how the students would be in the program for 4 years, in the high school for 4 years. That would almost be ideal, hopefully 5 if we could really make it work. But also, so the fact that products are obsolete, I'm wondering if there's other types of technology that don't get obsolete that quickly, that you've researched.
Well, the products we researched, there were mainly 3 different operating systems: the Macintosh operating system, Windows, and the Google Chrome. Obviously, if you've been reading any of the trade publications, Windows is in a little bit of a state of flux with the current OS being 8.1, but Windows 10 is on the verge of being released, probably be released around July. So that's something we haven't seen yet. It's new, we don't know. The other product was the Google Chromebook. We took a look at that product. We came up with a list of requirements that the product, whatever we chose, had to meet. And that those list of requirements came from teachers and students. I'm not a certificated educator, so I depend greatly on teachers and administrators telling me what are the educational needs of the school. Once they tell me that, I try and come up with a product that I feel can meet their needs. That's the first requirement. Even if it causes us to do a little bit more work, we got to meet the needs, the educational needs of the kids. So with that list of requirements, we looked at those platforms, and overwhelmingly, the teachers and students said the Apple product met their needs. So that's what we kind of went with.
Do we have a standardized list of those needs for the high school? Because right now we're just talking about what the high school
That is correct.
needs, right? So is that standardized that all the teachers or the administrators are on board with that list of criteria?
Well, I would never say all of anything. It just never happens. But the overwhelming majority of the teachers who I spoke with or who we surveyed or who participated in, that's what they said.
Mr. Poy, may I ask a question of Dr. Alvarez in this?
Certainly, yeah, we're discussing it.
And Dr. Alvarez was part of the curriculum.
ma'am,
and
she was.
So can, maybe you answer that question about the standards? Like, are we providing this, are we looking at the technology and saying, okay, this is as close to our needs as possible? Or are we going out and saying, this is what our criteria is, and we would like to find the technology that matches our criteria, or is it vice versa?
The second, the first thing you said, we sent, when we were soliciting proposals from all of the vendors, we sent them our list of criteria that came from the students and the teachers, and included with that was also our PD requirements, our professional development requirements that we wanted. And then the vendors came back with their proposals meeting those requirements.
And so you're saying that the iPad met most of the requirements that we need?
At all of them,
Met all of them?
yes.
Okay, and in terms, so that's the hardware, correct?
Yes.
How about the software? Will it, when we're talking about the cost of the hardware, that doesn't include the ongoing cost of the software that is used for that, right?
Well, fortunately for us on the iPad, once you buy an app, you own the app. So we can move that app from one device to another, and there is no additional cost. Only time you will get an additional cost is if the enrollment increases.
Well, what about the e-books, and what about the Pearson
Yep.
software that
Now,
goes
books
on?
are different than apps. Books you have to
Right.
buy per student every year, unless a kid repeats a course, then they can keep that same book. But books you have to buy, and most of the books are $14.99 each.
That's the e-books,
That is the iBook.
the iBook.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
And they change every year? So
Well, the books belong to the kid. So if one, we buy 20 one year, and those kids advance to the next grade level, and now you got a new group of 20, you have to buy 20 new licenses of that book. So the book belongs to the student, not the device.
But, I'm sorry, forgive me for being obtuse, but say that again about the licensing. Every year we have to buy a licensing agreement for the use of those books?
For the use of those books. If that's given that, it's a different student. The book belongs to the student, not the device.
But years ago, if we had a hardcover book, the book came back to the school. So that's not the case anymore? We're essentially buying a new book every year?
With the iBooks, that's correct.
But the cost is cheaper for the license than it would be if we bought a hardcover book.
Not over time, probably, right?
Depends, usually our textbooks last for about 5 years, and then we look at them to see if they still meet our needs.
But if a book is, let's say, $20,
They're not $20.
no. Okay, so let's say the software is $20, but we have to renew it for the 4 years for that student. What's that, it's not $100.
That's,
It's-
he
it's
says
a-
$14.99, so you figure
$14.99.
$60 for the year. Most textbooks are more expensive than that.
Right, but we don't have to buy the textbook every year. We can keep the textbook for 4 years, let's say. So how,
Right.
does it
But most-
even out?
No, it would cost more money to do the paper book.
Okay, and are we restricted to certain softwares? Like, again, we had Pearson, do we only have to buy from Pearson?
No, we buy, for the iPad, we can buy anything that's in the App Store, and that includes products other than Apple products. It's pretty much anybody who creates an app and gets it approved by Apple, we can purchase that.
Confused between an app and a book.
Yes, they're two different things.
Okay, so can you answer the question about the books? Do we have only one supplier of books?
No. We can still look at all of the different companies. Even Pearson right now is looking at converting all of their books to ebooks. So iBooks are specifically to Apple. Ebook is for any platform. So no, Pearson is not the only book company that we use.
Do they own rights to books?
They're all publishing companies, yes.
If he has a suggestion, maybe he can clarify.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
If you want to clarify something
Your
that I
microphone,
didn't understand.
Arminio.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, if there's more clarification, because I might not be asking the question properly.
About the books?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say the books are $15, just use round numbers. If we The lifespan, I think the adoption cycle is every 5 years in Monroe. So let's just say you spent 15 times 5, which is $75. I think what Dr. Alfred is saying is most books are more than $75. So you would have bought another hard copy anyway because of the adoption cycle.
Okay.
Mr. Ryback?
Thank you. I have just a couple of comments and a question. I'm sure, as most of my colleagues here, I want to see our district remain at the cutting edge, and therefore, certainly, you know, in what's going on in education today, I think the one-to-one initiative is not unique to Monroe, although I know we were one of the leaders in it, and I'm happy about that. And it's important that we stay there. But just as important that we don't repeat mistakes of the past. We owe that to our students and to the taxpayers as well. So I know at the prior curriculum committee meeting, I know I walked in and I was thinking Google Chrome, and then I was listening to the administration, and it's important that the teachers get what they need to teach. They're the ones that are doing it. I know that was recommended, it met all the needs. And then I understand Dr. Alvik was saying that the Apple lowered the prices considerably and made it a lot more attractive to us. So we decided that, well, that's obviously the way to go. It met the district's needs. They lowered the price and everything. But in listening to what Mr. Nostley was saying today, I personally would like to see, and I certainly see the importance of it, Tom, I think it's a very good suggestion that we try to get that Apple Care for 4 years instead of 3. I think that would make a world of difference, and it would give us another year of $1.6 million. I'm not refuting the Apple. I'm not refuting the the iPad or any of that. I'm just thinking, is it possible to get them to go for a 4-year Apple Care?
I will certainly ask the question. I haven't seen that listed in their documentations that come out. Originally, Apple Care was for 2 years. Then they extended it to 3 years because the schools are saying this is not long enough. I'll ask about the 4, but I have not seen that in any of their publications that they put out, but we can certainly ask the question.
My thinking is they lowered the price considerably, making it more attractive. I know they're selling less machines than they have because obviously there's more competition. Right. It's worth a try, okay, and that's
absolutely.
all I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Kaufman?
Sure. Mr. Washington, can you talk about some of the other intrinsic values that we're getting at the district level with regard to PD from Apple that we have as part of our program, because it's in effect part of the package? And then you can answer that in 1 second, but I wanted to make sure everybody's crystal clear on, because I saw a lot of weird faces in the audience when we're talking about the different modalities of textbooks and everything. So keep me honest, and I'll be brief. If it starts with an I, it's Mac or Apple. So an iBook is typically something that runs in a Mac environment. If it's an ebook, it typically is more broad and it can run on almost any type of device. The thing to keep in mind too, that the way these documents or these books are delivered also varies. Sometimes you can have a textbook or solution that's delivered and it runs completely on the network. So you can use a particular device that has no local storage to access the information because the book itself isn't resident on the device. It's on the network. We also have textbooks in our district that are actually delivered to the physical device, like our iBooks, right? So these documents or these textbooks have to have local storage to be able to carry that book along, because you have to be able to use the book without a network connection, right? So all of these things come into play when you're making decisions, not just what kind of E or I book are you going to develop, but what kind of equipment do you have to deliver this to? If you only have a Chromebook solution, then the only type of electronic book you can get is something that's running off a network because there's no local storage. There's no way to run it without it being connected to the network. So these are just some of the things that went into that list that was shared with the curriculum of the business requirements, if you will, of students versus teachers. And we did do a little different this time because we actually did have a technology day where we actually invited the whole community in to take a look at all of the vendors. And we also asked for people to give feedback of what they thought of the different providers that came in that day. So two questions back to you. It's the one I asked before, and if you can briefly talk about what the results were from the surveys when people came in for that roundtable open session.
You did a very good job of explaining the difference between the iBooks and the eBooks. And we do have both. We do have some of our curricular areas, they use eBooks, which are published to work on any device. And from a vendor's standpoint, that's ideally what they want. In the beginning, they started out with everything was iBook, because it was an Apple device. So manufacturers wrote for the iPad. Now, just like any business, they're in business to make a profit. So now they wanted to expand their horizon, and they start publishing ebooks, which don't limit you to just the iPad. It'll work on any device. So the trend in the publishing world right now is to go E versus I, so that they don't limit. They're not excluding the iPad, but they are including the Windows devices. So thank you for that explanation. Some of the intrinsic values that Apple has brought to the table. I mean, a lot of this terminology is educational terminology, to be quite frank, but that's not my chosen profession. But my understanding is Apple has come in and really showed the teacher and leverage their product to flip the classroom, where no longer is the teacher the center of the stage in the classroom, but the kids are actually in charge of their own learning. And I'm only hearing this from other educators. I'm not in the classroom. I don't know all of that real good stuff like that. But they have come out and they've worked directly hands-on with our teachers. And they use a turnkey approach where they train a core group of teachers, and those teachers in turn go back to their colleagues and they sit and work with them. So I've certainly seen the classroom itself change from being teacher-centered to be more student-focused. I hope I answered your question, Mr. Kaufman.
Yeah, it was good. One last comment, and I promise I'll shut up. E versus I feel like I'm a member of the public that comes before us every now and then, talks about what the state is or isn't doing for us. So this is my 2 seconds on the soapbox. In Lou's perfect world in the future, we'll forget about E, we'll forget about I. We should be developing our own content. We talked about that a million times, so that we can completely disconnect ourselves from licensing agreements with these big vendors, because whether we have a single year or multi-year agreement, it's still content. We still have all of these devices with all of this technology to be able to have students in a flipped class environment developing the content. Let's leverage the content, reuse the content, and break us completely from dependency on publishers so we have our own material. And in the perfect world, we could start selling it to other districts. That's it, I'm done.
Mr. Boyd?
Dr. Alvich?
Just so that everyone is aware, the presentation that we made to the curriculum committees and the finance committees is available on our website. We have posted on the website at the request of Mrs. Kalapanowicz. So it's there. Included in that presentation are several examples from teachers at the high school of how they're using the technology. There's a math example, there is a science example, and there's a language arts example there. And the teachers have shared this with me to show how they're using the iPads and how they're using the technology in the classroom. So it's there for you to look at.
Ms. Kolapanovich?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. The technology committee that was put together, that met, what, 2-3 times?
You mean the high school technology committee?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, met twice.
And then they had that technology fair.
Yes, ma'am.
So the recommendation to go with the iPad, and I don't know who's going to answer this question, did that come from the tech committee surveys?
It did, ma'am.
It did, okay. And some financial questions. We just passed the budget for next year, Mr. Gorski. Was there a line item in that budget for new technology for next year?
Yes, there is an existing line item in the 14-15 budget for the Apple iPad one-to-one initiative lease. And there is a line item in the 15-16 budget of approximately $400,000. And the way we calculated that was we considered the various platforms that were before the committee at the time. We considered the way we would have to bid for sale our existing units and what we could expect as a range for receipt. And we factored that over a 3-year lease, and that came to just about $400,000. So there's about $400,000 in the instructional purchase services line item for the one-to-one initiative.
Okay, does that 400,000 include the sale of the current iPads?
Yes, ma'am.
It does, and we can make a good amount of money off of that.
I believe the figure that was conservatively represented to the Finance Committee was to sell all the existing iPads and the teacher iBooks. iBooks was about $200,000.
And in the past, I believe the parents for each iPad that was purchased put in I think it was $65 for an insurance fee.
That's correct.
And if we did that again this year, because that's not a given, that would offset some of the costs also?
Yes, ma'am. About $130,000 could be raised from the insurance, and that would offset the cost.
Okay.
That was the board's directive when we made the policy for the insurance.
Mr. Kaufman?
You said something that reminded me of something. If I'm not mistaken, last year when the topic came up about the insurance program for this year, there was conversation even last year about starting to refresh last year, and we decided to get another year out of the program and reschedule it for this year. So it's not like this is new news. We talked about it last year, so it's just, this is next year, right? Okay.
And for the procurement of the new iPads and the teacher computers, if the board moves tonight, we will again put the existing units up first, bid for sale, and take those proceeds, offset the new amount as a down payment by putting that against it. We would put all the residual balance in that parent money fund toward that purchase also. I don't know the exact balance off the top of my head, but I think there's about $60,000 in that account. And also the new proceeds from the fund would help offset the price also. So you will wind up paying significantly less than the $400,000 that's in the budget because of all those variables. And of course, we're going to procure these as efficiently as possible through state contract.
Mr. Prezioso?
Reggie, are we going to take a survey of the iPads that are already in service to see which ones are in great condition and which ones aren't?
That's at the end.
Yes, so we generally collect the iPads from the students on their last day of testing. So it's pretty crazy day that last day of school when we're going around to get the iPads, but we do take a survey of them at that time.
So the board will see that, right?
Oh, you're welcome to see them.
Is that one of the iPads that the students use? How old is that one?
That particular iPad is 3 years old.
3 years old?
Yes, sir.
That's in good shape, that one, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And question to Dr. Albich. Do we have plans to move the one-to-one initiative to the middle school?
Not at this time.
Didn't we talk about that at the finance meeting?
We had talked about it. It was something that we were looking at, maybe piloting something possibly with Chromebooks next year at the middle school. But it wouldn't be a full-scale one-to-one. It would just be a pilot to see how they worked.
It would be the start of a full scale.
Possibly, depending on the outcome of the pilot,
We
yes.
would also, in every 3 years, possibly look for more money for the middle school.
If it was the direction that we wanted to go in, yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Arminio?
Who are we anticipating selling the current iPads to?
Thank you. I honestly couldn't say. I don't have an answer to that because what we'll do is we'll put together bid specs for the sale, advertise it to solicit the most competitive bids for the existing units, and in this case, sell it to the highest bidder. And believe it or not, there are a lot of companies whose business is buying used Apple products and refurbishing them and then selling them
Okay,
on
it's not like another school's going to possibly buy. Who bought them the last time?
a company that was in business to refurbish them and then sell them to the private sector.
So, again, to go back to the very beginning of the conversation, is it anticipated that well, now it's, if this is on the agenda for approval tonight, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, it's discussion, and now that it's on for resolution.
I understand that there is a resolution that's been prepared if it's the will of the board.
Because I'm still a little uncomfortable, because I did anticipate this just being a discussion and trying to get a little bit more information on it. Is it, I don't know if it would be the will of the board to have a specific technology special board meeting to review this and open it to the public as well. I mean, that would make me more comfortable talking about it at little great length. But my question is, if we're trying to look for like perhaps a 4-year Apple Care, we really shouldn't talk about voting on it tonight. And if I can finish, if it is only 3 years, are we anticipating, and what was the cost, about $1 million something? That every 3 years that will be the cost to this?
$1.6
million. $1.6 million? Almost $2 million.
$1.6 million is the purchase cost. However, you can anticipate selling the existing 2,000 units will bring you in a good amount of money. So the cost is not $1.6 million, it's less than that. There have been tech committees at the high school that began when, Reggie? When was the first meeting?
It was, the tech committee began with the strategic planning from Dr. Hamilton.
When was that?
3 years ago, 2 years ago, when we first.
And then the high school had a technology committee to study the one-to-one initiative recently. When did that begin? Over the summer?
The beginning of this year.
So beginning of the summer, we had the platform. Then it went to the curriculum committee. Then it went to finance committee. And my only concern that I would like to represent to the board is, you know, this is the natural maturation process where it comes to the board and action is taken at the conclusion of that. And I'm concerned that if it's tabled or deferred longer, that there could be time constraints with the bidding and the state contract resolution for the purchase and getting these items ready to go by September. Is that a valid concern, Mr. Washington?
Yes, sir.
But
I think we should have did this.
Mrs. Koloponowicz?
the technology fair that we had was open to the public, so that anybody who had a ticket was able to come in. I don't think anybody was turned away. And also, I think there was the majority of the board members who was at that fair that night. So we had the opportunity, if you so desired, to visit every single platform or company that was there and get some information and then fill out the survey. I believe that night, and I don't think it was one of the better nights that we've ever had, there was over 300 people there from the public who had that opportunity to come in and be a part of that tech fair.
Yeah, and no one was turned away. We were able to accommodate anyone who wanted to attend.
Mr. Nostine?
I want to make it perfectly clear. I think maybe people are thinking that I'm not for the iPads. I want what's best for the students and the teachers, and it's been pretty much, I think, settled that that's what they want. That's where their needs lie. I'm not arguing that, or to me, that's not even a discussion item. My discussion item here is the fact that have we looked into being more cost effective? For example, Mr. Gorski just mentioned that there's a company that takes these back and refurbishes them and then sells them. Well, have we looked at that as an option? We have a unique opportunity here in the fact that we're not switching platforms. If we were switching platforms, the time crunch that we're talking about would be a real thing. But since we're not switching platforms, if we don't implement this until November, it's not the end of the world because it's the same platform. We're not gaining any extra functionality by going with the new MacBook Pros or the iPad Airs. So my concern is, are we being and using the resources that the public gives us in the correct fiduciary manner that we should be? Everybody likes new stuff. I do too. I'm a gadget person. I love getting new stuff. But when we're using other people's money, I think it's really incumbent upon this board to say, is there a better way of doing this? Is there some way that we can buy refurbished ones? Is there some way that we can use the resources that we have and say, you know what, we're only going to replace 1,000 of them, or 500, or something, to show the public that we're really being stewards of their money and that we're not just going to say, well, it's 3 years, they're old, let's get new ones. Because obviously there is a need out there. People are going to buy them. A company's going to buy them and refurbish them. Costs to refurbish these are not that much. And if we can cut our costs in half, Even if it's in the budget already, that doesn't mean that we can't save money. So it's not a matter to me that the technology committee said, well, of course that's what they said, because that is, I feel right now, that's what meets our needs the most, is the Apple product. But I think because of that, we need to be more cost conscious. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
The contract we negotiated with iPad, or Apple, excuse me, was that for a specific number of iPads? Like,
Yes, I believe that the proposal that we received was for that quantity of iPads. Because we are a return vendor, Apple wanted to maintain our business and was reduced a per unit cost by $200. I could say previously, when Dr. Gorman negotiated both prior iPad purchases with Apple, they wouldn't even give us free covers because the device was new. And I think now that it has caught on and that many school districts are following Monroe's lead in this one-to-one initiative, that Apple would like to maintain us as a customer, and they've been much more competitive.
so if we went back and said we didn't want as many as we had previously negotiated, we'd have to renegotiate the whole entire contract.
I believe that's fair to say, that if we ask for a lesser amount, that we would receive maybe not as much of a discount. That's usually the case.
Thanks.
Mr. Prezioso?
We're going to vote on this tonight without knowing our options. I mean, I just asked if we could take a survey on what's working, what's not, and evidently some of these are in very great condition. Why would we vote on buying something new when we don't even have options?
Taxes?
May I rephrase your question, Ms. Prezioso? In other words, out of the 2,000-plus iPads that we presently have, if we found that 800 of them are in great condition, don't need any repairs or refurbishing, then why not keep those 800 and only have to worry about buying another 1,600? Is that basically what you're getting at there?
Option, sure.
Mr. Washington, can you respond to that?
We can certainly take a look at the iPads when they come back from the kids, but there's certainly going to be some that are in pristine condition like this one. There's no doubt about that. But there certainly will be a greater percentage of them that are damaged. I can almost guarantee you that. The exact numbers, I don't know, but we can do that. I mean, school's out, I think, the 24th of June, and we can do an inventory on them at that time. Now, that does put you under a tremendous crunch because all schools are placing their orders at that time. So once school budgets are passed in April, schools generally start cutting purchase orders. So now we can potentially be dealing with an inventory shortage. Just putting that out there as a precaution.
There are some that are pretty good. We could give them to the freshmen. We could save some money buying these new iPads, most of them anyway. And like I said, there's no options. We're just going to vote. Let's get new ones.
I certainly don't have the expertise that Dr. Alvich or Mr. Washington have in this area, but understanding how these devices are used in every classroom now, I'm concerned because I've seen firsthand the consequence of what happens when a device fails. It almost instantly stops the classroom lecture. A call goes down to the tech office, help has to come, and an opportunity to teach is lost. I would just like the board to consider that if you're using a 3-year or older platform that has lived beyond their useful life, and that's what I'm hearing, that there's a risk to education from that standpoint. There could be interruption, and we don't really have a staff that in place to handle that kind of attention that older devices would use. We've been dealing mostly with new platforms, one that was refreshed only after 10 months. As you push it down the road and you use an older device that may or may not be suitable for updates from Apple anymore, with button problems, it could disrupt instruction because these are so critically used now.
Can I ask a question? If we do what Anthony's talking about, then we have 2 sets of iPads with different functionality, right? Because the newer ones have different functionality than the older ones.
Yes, and some of the issues will be the updates. We wouldn't be able to update them as Apple is a business and they want to sell the device. They want to, sell new devices. So as they get older, you're not able to update them in order for our students to be able to use them to the best. The other piece of the newer devices would we would be able to run. Correct me if I'm not using the right terminology, Mr. Washington. We'd be able to use them easier for park because you can set them up so that Mr. Washington would be able to easily flip them to park mode. So the students would actually be using their own devices for testing next year, rather than having to put some aside, set them up specifically for park for the students to use. The other concern that I would have with the devices is we can't get insurance on them. So any device that went down after this, any of the older devices that went down, we couldn't replace them for the students.
So if the students are able to use their own devices for the park, that will free up other devices so that we could have more children doing the park rather than, the way we're doing it now?
Yes. And then they would be able to take the park within their classrooms.
Okay, and then that would be less of a loss of instruction times? Okay.
Mr. Nothstein?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Washington, but I have not seen that issue where you're not able to upgrade the iOS operating system other than what Apple kind of messed with people's minds when they did the first gen. 2 years later, you couldn't upgrade the iOS.
Well, there are certain iPads we have currently that you cannot put the latest iOS on them. That hasn't been the case with the ones that students currently have, but we do have others, which was purchased by the pupil personnel department earlier. They cannot take the upgrade. Now, I would be concerned at the high school because you have mixed grade level classes. If we're thinking of giving one particular grade the older iPads, what's to say those kids are not in the same class? Say if it's a geometry class, we might have 10th and 11th or 9th grader in there. So you have to be careful at the high school level because you have mixed grade levels in a particular subject. So it's harder to break that up. You can't just go by all 9th graders get this because I can't say what class that 9th grader is in. They may be in a class with other upperclassmen.
No, I understand that, but basically what you said, though, the ones that the students currently have are all capable of being upgraded to the new iOS system, correct?
To the current one.
The current one, exactly.
Correct. Now, Apple pushes out an update certainly every September, October, and I don't know if it's going to run on the older iPad.
Realistically, some of these upgrades, for example, the last iOS upgrade just enabled you to use the smartwatch. So these are not mind-altering or game-changing type of upgrades for the most part.
For the most part, that's correct. But the one prior to that actually enabled us to use the iPad in park because there were certain features that were available. They discovered later on the iPad that Apple had to release some restrictions so that kids couldn't bring up, say, the thesaurus and things like that. So sometimes they're critical when they come out.
Right, but as of now, they can use them for park. There's nothing stating that they're not going to be upgradable in the next to the near future. So
as of April 24th at 8:15, that is correct.
Right.
But these updates come out all the time.
But it's kind of scary that we're locking ourselves into a platform that does that. That's my big concern. You look at Microsoft, I still have customers using XP, okay? And so when I hear that I know what they did to me when I bought the first gen Apple, okay? Right. 2 years later, no more upgrades, 5 is as best as I can do. That's not really a good company that does that in my mind. They're locking the schools in, and it's hurting the students because you just said that some of these upgrades, could hurt the students. And here we are going again to purchase the same platform. I don't know if the teachers looked at that or the technology staff looked into those kind of details. It was really just, what do we want now? Front-facing, rear-facing camera, etc. Nobody said, what's the most bang for the buck? Okay, first of all. Nobody said what's going to have the longest life cycle. Nobody said upgrade capabilities. These are all things that are coming after the fact, and that's why I'm not quite sure that we're in a good position right now to be locked into this without really thinking at a bigger picture at this point and saying, let's negotiate better with Apple, because quite frankly, this isn't, to me, in my mind, a great deal. Apple's sales are down for their tablets. There's no question. There's a lot more competition. They're hungry. So I think this is our time to strike and say, it's a good platform, not a great one, but it's a good one, and that's what we like. So let's save some of the taxpayers' money. That's all I'm asking.
I'd like to hear from Mr. Tharney. I know I'm catching you off guard there, but you are, I believe, in the 11th grade.
Correct.
Just about to, in another couple of months, you'll be finished with it, so you've had 3 years' experience with the iPad. Could you share with the board your thoughts on how having that iPad has improved your learning, your achievement? How have you found it beneficial?
Mr. Poi, so like you said, I'm in 11th grade, so almost 3 years of using this device, and I've also had the pleasure of serving on the high school's committee for the technology, and I've attended the technology exposition as well. I think that this iPad has, definitely improved my learning in terms of its capabilities, its applications, and the iBooks as well. And I know that within, while staying within the realm of fiscal responsibility, in terms of the applications, with the exception of the iBooks, the school can spend, minimum amount of money and deploy them on all of the iPads. I believe that at the technology exposition, I got figures from Mr. Washington. I think that the school for 1 year had spent less than $200 in terms of just the applications and deployed them on over 200 iPads, or no, not 200, 2,000. I think that's right there very beneficial. And as far as the ebooks and the iBooks, because I know that was brought up earlier, there was my freshman year, I had iBooks on the iPad, which once the redemption code was entered, it was strictly associated with my user. And since then, at least with my AP Calculus course now, we're currently using CourseSmart, which means that instead of having to purchase, the iPads and giving to students where it's associated with their ID forever, it's more of a rental type thing where you have it for, I believe, about a year, and then it expires. And you're also able to use that offline and on computers as well. In terms of the iPad itself, I think it really depends on the class. For example, in my history class, there's very minimal projects. It's primarily lecture-style class because it is an advanced placement class. The most that the iPad could really be used in that sense is for taking notes or doing some research, perhaps at home. But in that class, it's not necessarily as useful compared to some different honors courses or science or even calculus with the textbook, with the AP Central for our preparation for the tests. It's a little bit more integral within the curriculum, using projects enabling peer-to-peer collaboration. Although from my understanding, the Chromebooks may or may not further enable that because it's sometimes difficult to try to collaborate when you have multiple people and the file only is residing on only one iPad, and it's difficult to sometimes send that back and forth, especially if the student webmail server is down, which that happens frequently. But overall, I think that the district's deployment of the one-to-one initiative within the iPad so far has definitely been a beneficial asset in terms of our education, with different apps that enable us to conduct labs or send homework back and forth between teachers and students, or working to collaborate with other students on certain projects and activities, and the different apps that allow you to have a broader access of information within the classroom.
Okay, I appreciate that, and as I told you, I know I caught you off guard, and I do apologize for that, but you were here tonight, and I thought it might be beneficial for the board to hear your feedback on that.
Thank you.
I know many, and Mr. Nostine referred to this, you said getting the biggest bang for your buck. And I know, because of expense, that many large quality high schools in New Jersey have gone to the Chromebook.
Right.
And they probably did this, I'm now really addressing it to Dr. Alvich and Mr. Washington. I'm sure they did this because of the cost factor, but I'm sure they did it also after doing some research. It would help me to understand what can we do with the iPad that we could not do with the Chromebook? I mean, specifically how much, if we went to a Chromebook platform, how much would that really alter our program in terms of the academic content, activities, student learning? And I don't know if anyone can answer that. Once again, I'm catching you off guard with that question. I realize that.
I've been able to visit Robbinsville High School. That's where my daughter attends school. They have recently instituted Chromebooks as a pilot this year to see how they've worked with Park. What I've found is, and what I've learned from the assistant superintendent there, is they did it because of the cost factor. That was the reason they went with the Chromebook, not so much for how they could be used in the classroom, but for the cost factor. Because it was cheaper, they were able to get more devices to help them with the Park testing. The difference with the Chromebook is everything is on the cloud. There's very little storage space on the computer. So for a student wouldn't necessarily be able to have an entire textbook available to them at all times like they can on the iPad because it's on the cloud. So if they weren't on the Wi-Fi, they wouldn't be able to get the textbook. They could download pieces of the textbook if they needed a chapter for homework or something like that, because there's a small amount of space, of storage space. There are differences between the Apple apps, the applications that we can download onto the iPads. There's a difference between them and Google for Education. Google for Education is increasing their number of apps, but they're not where Apple is with the apps that are available. The tech department did look at a list of, they actually sent Google a list of our current apps that we're using in our building, in our schools here, and Google sent back what their compatible apps would be, and they weren't all there either. Mr. Washington, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I just wanted to add, I think one of the things we do well in Monroe is we don't allow the technology to drive the curriculum. The curriculum drives the technology. And based upon the curricular needs, is we try and find a compatible technology to meet those needs. Perfect point. Certainly the Chromebook is a maturing technology. And 3 years from now, I couldn't possibly tell you where they're going to be. I think they probably will be the leader. As of this point in time, I don't think they are. Certainly they can do word processing, spreadsheets, and presentation. The students in Monroe have gone beyond that. We're talking about actually putting together full motion, audio-enabled presentations in the classroom. So we're not talking about just typing a document here anymore. We're not just talking about putting together a basic spreadsheet. They've gone beyond that. And the things that the students are doing on the iPad, there are no apps in the Google store that can do that today. I can't say that 3 years from now will be a different world, but Google is making big strides. It's certainly a technology we're going to have to consider, but for the 2015-2016 school year, I don't think they'll be where the iPad is.
I have one more comment and then I'll stop. And I recently read, and this has always been a concern of mine, and possibly Dr. Alvich, you have some information on this, although I wouldn't expect you to share it with us tonight. But a lot of high schools have jumped into this technology train. They've jumped on it. And it is very, very new. But I'm not so certain that we have the research to support the fact that it increases or improves learning. In fact, recently I read an article in the newspaper where a study had been done that found that people who read an old-fashioned book, where you turn the pages, as compared to people reading that same book in an electronic format, the people who were reading it in the old-fashioned way had greater retention of the material than the people that were doing it electronically. I've also heard of students that have been given assignments, and what they do is they simply go and they search They do a search for that particular topic, and lo and behold, if the questions that they're being asked are not right there, so they just basically dump the answers that are there. So they're not really doing anything except learning how to use that technology. But my greater concern is really the fact that we're spending millions of dollars, and I had this concern back before I was on the board, and I heard that we were going to iPads. We're spending millions of dollars, and we're talking about committing the spending of millions of dollars in the future. And yet I'm not so certain that we have any research that tells us how effective that is for student learning. It may make for a more dynamic classroom. It may give you more razzmatazz in terms of the productions that are done in the classroom, the presentations. And yes, those are valuable in the business world. But I'm not so certain that without some research, and we're not in a position to do that. That has to be done at a university level by people who know how to conduct research. But I'm just not so certain that this is going to give us everything that we would be hoping for. Final say on that. I did look at this document. I'm sorry, it's not my final say. Because you present it in here, I just want to call this to the attention of the board members. There was a lease option of 3 years versus 4 years. It looks to me as if it's the same amount of money for both of those, if I'm not mistaken. But if we go with the 3-year plan, which means that we then have to pick up another year and an additional cost, the way I calculated it, it appears that we would be spending $894 per student over a 4-year period of time for having an iPad. For a student to have an iPad for 4 years, and this is just based on the cost of the iPad, not all the other stuff that comes with it, it would be $894. But if we went with the 4-year plan that was here, then the cost would be $671 per student. I'd like to know if that's correct or not, because to me that's a significant difference. You know, that's over $200 difference there. And yet it's the same amount of money. Now, this was on the cost proposal.
It's the same amount of money. It's a 0% financing from Apple, so it just spread the total cost over 4 years rather than 3. That's why it's cheaper per student, because it's 4 years. The problem with the 4th year, as we've mentioned before, is the Apple Care. We'd have to purchase the insurance, which is what happened this year with the insurance.
Okay, but even if we had to purchase that insurance, I'm sure it would be less than $220 per iPad.
I'm not sure
because
how much
that's what the differential is here.
We're going to have some challenges with finding the insurance. If you can recall, this year we had to go to the insurance company because there was no Apple Care. The insurance company informed us that they compete for Apple Care. So if your device doesn't have Apple Care or it's not eligible for Apple Care, they don't want to insure that device because they know it's going to be problematic. So if we went with the 4-year lease, that 4th year, we'd have to try and find someone who would provide insurance. Our current insurance company will not cover it. We'd have to try and find someone else.
Braverman?
I have a question. Looking at the specifications that the teachers wanted and what they wanted for the students, from my point of view, and I'm certainly far from very knowledgeable about these computers or technology, but what I see on the specs is you want a camera for the students and you want a camera for the teachers. Other than that, could this do the same thing as an iPad?
The laptop has that capability of doing the same thing on the iPad. The challenge with the laptop is it's different.
So you're saying that it can do the same thing?
The laptop certainly can.
Okay, so why, I'm sure that every student that has an iPad is not taking pictures. I can't believe that 100% of these kids are taking pictures. And if they are, they're not taking them at the same time. So I would think, in view of whatever, I'd like to send this back to the committee with the permission of the board and come up with a plan for something other than the iPad that we can use that might be more economical. And if they need cameras, you can get cameras for $15. Pass them out to anybody that needs them. Let them throw them away when they're done. But the point that I'm trying to make is if it's just cameras that making it different, forget the cameras. I can't believe that every kid is using the camera at every time, at the same time. I just, if that's the only thing that's making it different, we have a problem.
Mr. Boy, Mr. Goodall was integral in our, and so maybe he can offer some of the things that that the high school's been using
And
for.
sir, I was made aware of that, and I wanted to call him up. I just wanted to make sure that all members of the board had an opportunity to speak on this. Anyone else have a comment or question to make? Mr. Ryback?
Mr. Washington, I just want to clear something up in my mind. You said that if we didn't buy an entire school's worth, let's say we just bought, I'm just picking a number, 2,000 new units or something. In other words, the older units may not be have the ability to do what the new units will do, because we really don't know what the new units are capable of at this point?
Today, the older units can do what the new units can do today.
Okay.
But I don't know what's going. I know they're going to release another iOS in close to December timeframe. Will that update go on to older ones? That I don't know.
I guess what I'm getting at is if we bought new ones today for a whole school,
Right.
it would basically be compatible with the ones we have now?
That's correct. That's
So,
correct.
so no student would be at a disadvantage?
That's correct. If we bought new.
And following, Mr. Braverman's line, one of the things, I'm not faulting anybody, it's just a shame that I know it's almost May, and here we are talking about this, and time is an important factor here in making a decision. But so is money, and we're talking about a lot of money, so everybody is sensitive to that. I'm aware of that. I just want to make sure that, again, what we're thinking about is going to be correct, and especially for the future. And I just want to emphasize I think, important idea that I'm hearing of getting the Apple Care for 4 years. I can't see voting on anything today if it's possible for us to get Apple Care for 4 years and covering it. I mean, for me, that's a key issue right there.
Yes, sir. I'll certainly ask the question tomorrow, and I'll probably have an answer tomorrow. But as I stated, I haven't seen anything in the Apple price guide that we get that mentions a fourth year.
Sometimes it's nothing like sitting down and bargaining with somebody personally.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Kaufman?
Sure. So, Reggie, this is not new news, right? We've had laptops in the district since the dawn of time, right? Clearly, the cost per unit for a laptop is much higher than the cost of a tablet. Can you speak to the cost differentiation? Because we're talking about, it's all cost, right? If it gets down to the fact that I can buy 3 or 4 iPads for the cost of 1 laptop, that's one issue, versus what it will be like in the future if we were to give out 2,000 of these with infinitely more moving parts than the iPads that we have today, what the impact is going to be for weight in the backpack, cost of repairs, all of the things that we're talking about here, and to answer Tom's question about, in your professional judgment, given, I know you're not new to the rodeo, you have experience with all of these devices, you've looked at all of the questions that we've come up to today. What is your recommendation as the best return on investment for the district?
For Monroe, in my opinion, it is best that we stick with the Apple platform and the iPad, and let me tell you why I say that. I don't know if you know, I'm a Windows guy. Windows, that's my baby. I love Windows. So why not Windows? Well, I can tell you one thing. September will not be a nice place to be in Monroe High School if we switch platforms on teachers. They will literally, I might not make it out of here. I might not make it out. I would be very, very concerned. The teachers, when we switch from Windows from the old school to the Mac in the new school, that year was rough. I'm sure I aged 10 years in that 1 year. Now they have gravitated and they love the device, they know how to use the device. I think the worst thing we can do for teachers now is to make a switch on them, because then we're going to send a message. We don't know what we're doing. And they're just going to wait us out. It took a lot of work to get them, the teachers, to say, you know what, this really can change instruction. It was a lot of hard work went into that. And 4 years later, we're there now. The teachers have spoken, they've told us what they want. And now they're going to say, you know, why do we take these surveys if we tell you what we want and you don't listen to us? I would love to go to Windows. I can control Windows like nobody's business. But you know what? At the end of the day, it's not about me. It's not about what makes my life easier. It's about giving the teachers the tool to do their job. And they've spoken. If we switched and left the iPad, if you want to say, all right, let's stay with the Apple and give them a MacBook, we can never afford it. A MacBook for every student in this high school, we can never afford it. So you would then be compelled to look at the Windows. I've given you my reason why we can't go to Windows at this point in time. We've got, what's critical in school, and I've only learned this because I've been working here for a while, PD is critical to the success of a program in a school system. It's critical. It's unlike businesses. My part-time job, they tell me straight up, you will learn it, you'll do CBTs, there will be no teacher in front of you, you'll do it on your own. Hey, that's just the way it is. Schools don't operate that way. Schools do not operate that way. I can recall the first day we gave teachers laptops, and you had to literally pull the paper grade book out of their hands, and it was hard. We have made a lot of tremendous progress here, a lot of tremendous progress. We looked at the Windows 8.1, the Surface. I love the Surface. I thought it was a great product. It'll never hold up in the hands of students. It's not enough protection on the Surface, and that's the Microsoft products running Windows 8.1. We looked at Dell products running 8.1. We looked at HP products running 8.1. The learning curve is steep. It is steep, and we're on the verge of Microsoft releasing Windows 10. I think that's going to be a game changer, but we got to let those products mature. They're not there yet. Just as Apple and the iPad, it's a mature device now. The Chromebook is a great tool when you had nothing else. When you had nothing else, the Chromebook's a great tool. But when I talk to my colleagues around the county, they said, if I had my druthers, an iPad versus a Chromebook, they're going to go with the iPad. It just offers so much more at this point in time. As the Chromebook matures, I think we have to take a look at it. But it's just simply not there at this point in time.
Mr. Arminio, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to...
I just wanted to iterate, Mr. Washington, that was brilliant. I mean, I really get that, but I don't think, and I'm with Tom, and I think most of the others, I don't think we need to change the format. I get that the iPad is where we belong, based on everything you've said. But I think the only thing we're asking is, again, to sort of renegotiate the situation for us and see if there isn't a way for us to just extend the life expectancy and the care. And the PD is essential. I'm not great at technology, and yet every time they change something in my business, I want to pull my hair out. When they change more than one thing at a time, it really gives me the jitters. But I think that if we took a poll, most of us don't have a problem with the format. You've declared that that's the best, and the teachers want it, and the students want it, and Mr. Thorney is very eloquent about it. That's not my issue. My issue is, can we see what the numbers are and do better and try to get an extension of this? Because again, being held hostage, it feels like, sometimes like you say, being held hostage to a business, and Dr. Aldridge said it, they're in the business to make money. So, but we're in the business to educate our students, but also to protect the position. There were, call it what you will, the first iPads that were purchased because maybe they were new, didn't work. I feel very compelled not to make that kind of error again. So I'm just more interested, not so much in you changing anything, but trying to get a better situation for us in order to go forward with it.
I will certainly ask those questions tomorrow. The number one question being, can we extend AppleCare to a 4th year? Number two question is, if we bought not the 2,400 but 1,400, how would that change the unit price? And I'll come back to you with that information.
And if you feel the difference between the units is as long as they can still do the job. And if, you know, and again, if the 2,400 unit is going to have a better life expectancy. I mean, I just like to know what the details are. I mean, this is the most detail I've gotten that I understand, so I appreciate that, and I appreciate Dr. Aldrich's. But I think this is what needed to happen, that we had to figure out that. So I accept your recommendation. I'm just asking for myself if we could do better.
I will do that, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Goodall, principal of our high school.
Thank you, Mr. Poi. Hearing a number of the comments in the back, and so a lot of great comments, I just wanted to give you a little bit from my perspective. In embarking on looking at what the next steps are for the high school, we talked about transparency, we talked about not rushing into something, and I thought we covered that over the past year and looking at the next steps for the high school with the High School Tech Committee, the Tech Expo, coming to both committees to make presentations. We didn't want to repeat some, I guess, sins of the past where teachers might have felt rushed or it was a decision where everyone wasn't included. Without question, amongst the vast majority, the iPad is the best device. It's beyond, and I know Mr. Braverman brought up the camera, it's beyond what they offer in terms of an engaging tool for kids. The educational apps, the workflow that exists between teacher and student, so many other things that we can go over at a curriculum committee meeting. The iPad is definitely, at least from my perspective and many, many others, the best device for our kids that's out there. In addition to that, Mr. Washington was fantastic in why he's recommending the iPad, the PD that Apple provides for our teachers, and how far they've come in the 4 years in terms of embedding instruction in their lessons. It would certainly, going to another platform, set us back significantly. I think, and I wrote a couple of notes, so I'm trying to touch on a couple of points. Going back, when we opened the high school, we made a decision not only to go to a one-to-one initiative, but also to a mobile one-to-one initiative, where the kids would have the iPad, it's a device they can freely carry here and home. We eliminated the existence of desktops. And I know in a lot of high schools, they have 4 or 5, maybe 10 desktops in a room. The teacher has a desktop. At this high school right now, there's only a limited amount of desktops, and that was at a significant savings when we went, using that format to go to. So the life cycle of a mobile device is certainly a lot less than your standard desktop device. So we knew going back there, the board members at the time, the administration, that the recycle and refresh of these devices would come sooner rather than later compared to desktops or maybe even laptops. So that you have to keep that in mind when you're making your decision about this, that going back, we knew that because we were using mobile devices, that the life expectancy of those devices just don't measure up to desktops. So that was a big part of it. And I think everything else has been covered, and let me just make sure so we can make an informed decision. Really, the big advantage of the iPad for the students is the organizational aspect of it, all of the educational apps, the workflow between teacher and student, and to me, the Apple iPad is the best tool for engagement that I've seen. And I was very open. I wasn't tied to any platform, but seeing the presentations at the Tech Expo and working with the vendors, as the principal of the building, I strongly recommend we continue using iPads. The business part of that, in terms of how we finance those and long-term lease agreements, I would leave up to the Board of Ed. But certainly know that in going to the mobile device, we knew that it would be a sooner refresh rather than later. So I think that's important to understand that moving forward. And if there were any questions of me, I certainly could answer them, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak in support of the initiative.
Any questions for Mr. Goodall? Okay, thank you, Mr. Goodall. All right, I think we have had sufficient time to discuss this, as was recommended by the Finance Committee. Does anyone want to make a motion relative to this particular item? Ms. Kolopanovich?
Read a resolution. Thank you. It is recommended that the members of the Board of Education approve the following resolution entitled, Resolution of the Board of Education of the Township of Monroe authorizing the acquisition of instructional technology. Whereas NJSA 18A:18A-42 authorizes the Board of Education of the Township of Monroe, the board, to enter into a contract exceeding the fiscal year for the leasing of equipment of every nature and kind. And whereas the board has a need to acquire 2,400 new iPad units and 200 MacBook units, collectively the equipment, for school purposes, and whereas the board desires to acquire the equipment through state contract. Now therefore be it resolved by the board as follows. Section 1, the board hereby authorizes the superintendent, the board secretary, and the board's counsel to proceed to draft documents and conduct such other activities as are necessary to accomplish the acquisition of the equipment through state contract. Section 2, the board hereby directs the board secretary to possess the necessary purchase orders and contracts to acquire the equipment. Section 3, the board president and board secretary are hereby authorized and directed to determine all matters in connection with the acquisition of the equipment not determined by this or subsequent resolution of the board as permitted by law. Section 4, copy of this resolution shall be placed on file with the secretary of the board. Section 5, the making of and transmission to the county superintendent of the application as required by NJAC 6A:26-10.1D is hereby authorized and approved, and the board's counsel, along with other representatives of the board, is hereby authorized to prepare and submit such application and to represent the board in matters pertaining thereto. Section 6, this resolution shall take effect immediately.
Okay, is there a second to that motion? Well, we first, there is a second, okay. All right, questions or comments? Mr. Prezioso?
This resolution says that 2,400 is set in stone, correct? And we have no other options.
Okay, anyone want to comment on Mr. Prezioso's point? Mr. Ryback?
Comment on his point. I haven't done this before, so I hope I'm correct, but I'd like to make a motion to table that motion until Mr. Washington can get the answers to the questions that were brought up here today. And certainly, I'd like to guess a time limit. You said you might get the answers by tomorrow or so. I know time's a factor, but I can't see approving a motion when we have, critical questions that have to be answered.
Second that.
But he has a motion to table.
It's a primary,
right?
that's a primary motion to table, then we take a roll
Okay,
call.
is there a second to that motion of Mr. Ryback? Mr. Nothstein has seconded. We do a roll call to table the present motion until we get the information that Mr. Washington will provide.
I have a question.
This is a primary motion
Well,
to
a question
table.
about the tabled motion.
We have to take a vote first.
I can't hear you.
We have to take a vote first.
Primary motion, it's got to vote first.
For the table?
Yes. Yes, motion has
There's
been
no
made and
question
seconded to
about it?
table. That's correct. Deliberation stops until the vote. Ms. Arminio.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman.
I abstain.
Mr. Zarneski. No. Ms. DeMayo.
No.
Mr. Kaufman. So noted. Thank you. Mrs. Kolpanowicz.
No.
Mr. Nostein.
Yes.
Mr. Prezioso.
Yes.
Mr. Ryback.
Yes.
Mr. Poi.
Yes.
Motion to table does not pass. The original motion is back on the floor for discussion. Because you need 6 affirmative votes to pass, you got 5.
You mean a majority of the board?
Majority of the board is
Full board.
6, including Mr. Zarneski. Mr. Kaufman's recusal does not change that. The threshold is 6, and there was 5. So motion does not pass the table. The original motion by Mrs. Koloponowicz is back on the floor.
That table was a wrong motion.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion that's on the floor? That's Mrs. Kolopanowicz's motion. Okay, then we will proceed with a roll call vote on the motion made by Mrs. Koloponowicz. I think you all were given copies of this. You found them there on the table. All right, Mr. Gorski.
Thank you. This is the Koloponowicz motion. Mrs. Arminio.
I'm not disputing the choice of device, but no to the details, so no.
Thank you. Mr. Braverman.
Yes.
Mr. Zarneski. Yes. Ms. DeMayo.
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman. Thank you, sir. Mrs. Koloponowicz.
Yes.
Mr. Nostine.
Voting yes for the Apple iPad initiative, but no on the finances of this.
The motion on the floor was Mrs. Koloponowicz's.
That's correct. I'm voting no, basically.
You're voting no. Thank you, sir. Mr. Prezioso.
Again, we're being forced to vote no.
Your answer is noted as no. Mr. Ryback.
Unfortunately, I supposed to vote no, basically because I can't see voting yes if we don't have the answers to key questions. To me, that's like repeating mistakes of the past, and I have to vote no.
Mr. Poi.
No.
Motion does not pass.
Okay, before we proceed with the rest of the agenda, I make a motion that we recess for 5 minutes. I have break. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we will resume at 9 o'clock. The board will now come to order. We will have a regular agenda. Going to the approval of minutes, because some of you will have to abstain or recuse. We will have to do these individually as we did the last time. So I move that we accept the minutes of the Public Board of Education meeting of February the 11th, 2015.
So moved.
Second by Mr. Nostine.
Yes. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I move that we accept the minutes of the closed session meeting of February 11th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
I think it was.
You moved the motion?
I moved it, and Nostine actually said it.
Tom Nostine, thank you.
Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstentions?
I never know when I'm in and when I'm not.
Mr. Boyd?
I move that we approve the minutes of the special Public Board of Education meeting of February the 12th, 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Question, is that the one, what is that one?
Special one.
I know it's special. They all are to me, right? I just don't remember
That was,
whether it was the
it
superintendent
was.
one. Oh, then, yeah, abstain.
Yep.
Mr. Boyd? A point of correction, did Mr. Kaufman have an opportunity to abstain on the first minutes for February 11th?
Closed session.
First Public Board of Education, February 11th?
Oh, I didn't have an opportunity, no.
You wish to, sir?
I don't think so, I think it was there.
Okay. Beg your pardon.
Yeah, that was the regular meeting.
Fabulous meeting, right?
Oh, that's right, that's the... Where are we?
February 12th.
Okay.
You had Marvin asking a question.
Oh, have a question? Oh, he's abstaining.
So noted.
I move that we accept the minutes of the meeting, of the closed session meeting on February the 12th.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Mr. Braverman.
Kaufman and Braverman. I move that we accept the minutes of the special public Board of Education meeting of February 19th.
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Is this the meeting that we hire the people to find the superintendent? Superintendent search, the 19th?
I have the minutes before me.
I think so. It was a special meeting. I don't think we had a special meeting for anything else.
Oh. Yes.
So noted.
And finally, I move that we accept the minutes of the closed session meeting of February the 19th.
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, that completes the approval of the minutes. We will now go to committee reports. Does any chairperson have a report to make to the board? Mr. Kaufman?
Curriculum fans, yes, we did have another curriculum meeting this evening, second one for the month. We went over the SAT mathematics program. Ms. Gasco gave an overall view of how things have been going and what the new changes are going to be moving forward. Apparently, there's a new SAT coming out shortly, and questions were raised about how or if or when this SAT prep course for mathematics may or may not be adjusted to accommodate the ACT exam. So more to come on that. We were presented with the summer reading program, and for anyone that is interested, once it's approved, it'll probably be posted on the website. We went over the course of study for 2015-2016, and hold on, I can tell you what was added and deleted. We added an AP Physics C for grade 12. We added an AP Human Geography class. We also deleted Mandarin via distance learning, and we revised fundamentals of literacy offered in grade 9 through 12. And also in the arts, we had a curriculum name change from World of Music to Modern Music. We also received a PD update from Ms. Alvick, Dr. Alvick, on some of the new changes that are going to be coming down the pike for our professional development, and we had a very lively discussion about, yet again, offering these things for pay to other districts as a enterprise. Mike loves enterprises, that's what he lives for, as another enterprise effort to try and build some income into the district, because apparently other districts can't afford PD, and what do? They go out to other districts or other locations, make them come to us. That's it.
Any other chairpersons have a report? Mr. Kolopanovich?
We had a finance committee meeting, and most of the stuff we discussed in finance we have already done. The first was the budget. Mr. Gorski gave the committee a review of the budget, which is unchanged from the tentative budget, and we voted on that tonight, and it passed. The second item was a discussion on the one-on-one technology initiative. We had Dory Alvick, our assistant superintendent, Mr. Reggie Washington, the director of technology, and Mr. Robert Goodall, the high school principal, present data from the one-on-one high school technology committee. And Dr. Olvich recommended to the committee that we go with the Apple iPad, and as you saw a few minutes ago, the motion did not pass. The third item that we discussed in the last item was the MECA loan recommendation. Mr. Gorski presented the February 28th, 2015 financial statement from Mecca and recommended that the existing loan from Mecca to the general fund with the balance of $234,029 be carried over to the surviving ECE and the new Falcon Care Fund for repayment based upon a rational and systematic method of allocation. And that concludes my report.
Any other committee reports? Mrs. Arminio?
Yes, the policy committee met and we had some changes, but I would like to point out to the board members that if you received a hard copy on Thursday of the policies, that was they were incorrect. Not all of them, but some of them were incorrect and due to a clerical error. And the new ones were emailed to everyone on Monday, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. Gorski? Okay. So the policies, some of the policies that had been suggested, the committee decided to have them, some of the policy changes that were suggested, the committee decided to have them stick with the original policy, not the suggested. And primarily that was for board self-evaluation. The committee recommended that the board be as accountable as we expect everyone else to be, so we're keeping with the more stringent board evaluation policy. And the use of social network sites, bylaw 0135 is a newly created policy, so I hope everyone reviewed that for tonight's vote. Thank you.
Any other committee reports? Okay, thank you. We will then go to the superintendent's report.
Mr. President, it is recommended that the members of the Monroe Township Board of Education approve personnel items A through U.
Steve Ryback moved the motion. Is there a second? Second.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, Mr. Gorski, roll call vote.
Thank you. Ms. Arminio?
Yes.
Mr. Braverman?
Yes.
Mr. Zarneski? Ms. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman? Mrs. Koloponowicz? Mr. Nostine?
Yes.
Mr. Prezioso? Mr. Ryback?
Yes.
Mr. Poi?
Yes.
Mr. Board President, personnel items A through U passes.
Thank you. Mr. Ventrilo?
For board action, Mr. President, it is recommended that the members of the Monroe Township Board of Education approve board action items A through G.
Moved by Mr. Nostine, second by Mr. Ryback.
Okay, questions or comments?
Board action E, the AVID, and also on professional leave request, there's $8,600 for leave. That's not included in this registration fee, correct? And
Anthony, if I can address as far as item E, I guess the question is as far as the cost. Is that what the question is?
well, there's professional leave requests on some of the paperwork that we received. One's for $7,000 for AVID Summer Institute, and another one's also for the AVID Institute for $1,500. That has nothing to do with item E, correct?
It's the district leadership training.
And it is all part of it.
It's part of the
It is part of the contract. So it's the AVID District Leadership Training is part of that cost total. And then just to let you know as well, too, is that there's a savings there, and you should just be aware of it. There's a savings this year.
Prices are different. One says $7,170, the other one says $7,100. They're two different ones, and one says $2,097, and the other one says $1,509.
Sure.
Okay. The total costs under the professional developments are based on not only the registration, but it's also the mileage fee and the hotel fees. So depending on where we're coming from, because one of them is my registration for that summer institute, depending on where we're coming from, the mileage may be different. That's why the amounts are different. is based on the mileage of driving, because the Summer Institute is held in Philadelphia. And the reason, and mine is higher because I have to go through the leadership training since I'm new to the position.
I don't know why the figures are different.
Yeah, that's why they're different, it's the mileage.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I have a question about the policies. It's listed as being a first reading. So my question is, does that mean that these policies can still be modified before we finally adopt them, since this is a first reading?
If the policies are tabled or do not pass tonight, they could go back to policy committee and be revised. It would be recommended that they go back to committee for any amendment to them.
Okay, the reason I asked that question, and I did look these policies over, and I did attend the policy committee meeting, but in doing a second reading of them since that committee meeting, I was looking at policy 5460, which deals with high school graduation, and there are numerous references to the HSPA, and I think since the HSPA no longer exists, and is no longer a requirement for graduation, I would propose that we review the wording of that policy, and my suggestion is that we remove any references to HSPA and replace it with something like the annual assessments as mandated by the New Jersey Department of Education. Sure.
That's fine.
So does that mean that we remove that particular policy from this, if that's amenable to the sufficient number of the board?
It's a first read. Mr. Ventrilo can make those deletions.
Sure can.
That's a simple thing. It's not a real big change in the policy, so that's a simple fix. We could roll that out in the second reading.
Yes.
And I do apologize for not having caught that earlier. As I said, I only found it on a second reading, and I
that's good eyes, Doug.
thought let's clean that up if we could. Okay, so do we have a motion to accept board action items A through G? Okay, seconded. That's already happened, though, and we've done the discussion. Any further questions or comments? Okay, then roll call vote.
Ms. Arminio.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman.
Yes.
Mr. Zarneski.
Yes.
Mr. Mayo.
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman.
Yes.
Mrs. Kolpanowicz.
Yes.
Mr. Nostine.
Yes.
Mr. Prezioso. Mr. Ryback.
Yes.
Mr. Poi.
Yes.
Mr. Board President, board action items A through G passes, and it is noted that corrections will be made removing those items that you brought up.
Mr. President, that ends my report.
Thank you, Mr. Ventrilo. Mr. Gorski?
Mr. Board President and members of the Monroe Township Board of Education, it is recommended that board action items A through H be approved by consent roll call.
So moved. Second.
Okay, the motion has been seconded. Any questions or comments? No questions or comments? Roll call.
Ms. Arminio.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman. Mr. Zarneski.
Yes.
Mr. Mayo. Mr. Kaufman. Mrs. Kolpanowicz.
Yes.
Mr. Nostine.
Yes.
Mr. Prezioso. Mr. Ryback.
Yes.
Mr. Poi.
Yes.
Mr. Board President, board action items A through H passes. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, I have, as board president, I have two brief statements to make. One is I'd like to commend the staff as well as the students from the high school who put on the production of Young Frankenstein. It was a very animated production, and clearly we have some very talented young people that hopefully someday we may see appearing on Broadway or TV. Also, I'm directing Mr. Gorski to have a special meeting of the Board of Education for Tuesday, May 5th at 7 p.m. here in the library. This meeting will be for us to receive the information from our search team for the superintendent. He will deliver, my understanding is that he will deliver at that time the applications, resumes of the candidates that he has uncovered for us to take a look at as our next superintendent. I would encourage all of you as much as possible to make any changes in your schedule so that you can make that meeting. We will do things differently than we did the first time. Once we receive the information and hear whatever it is that Dr. Marasco wants to share with us, and that will be done in closed session, we will then not review the applications and resumes that evening. You will have more time to do that. They will immediately be available at the board office starting the morning of the following day. This is as early as we could move it up. I know some of you have some plans. I was hoping that we Monday. Unfortunately, Dr. Marasco said that Monday would not work, so we will have to be doing that on Tuesday evening. The other thing is, I believe that we can, by that time, we'll have the information from Mr. Washington, and we could, in public session, deal with the item of the one-to-one initiative, which some people were asking for. So we could have a motion at that meeting, whether to approve or not approve, whatever the motion might be regarding the one-to-one initiative. So you can anticipate that as well. At this time, I will read the resolution regarding, I'm sorry, is there any other board business? Ms. DeMayo.
What time on the 5th? That I missed that.
7 p.m.
7 p.m.? Okay, thanks.
Yes. And I do apologize for the short notice, although it's a week's notice. We were anticipating that we would be doing this the first week of May. I think you knew that from some time ago. I've been pressing Dr. Marasco to have that meeting take place, and this is the earliest that he can possibly do it. Mr. Nassim?
Also, I want to notify the board, as your appointed delegate to the New Jersey School Boards Association delegate convention, I will be meeting with the delegate convention on May 16th, and there's only one resolution this year, and basically the idea is that they want to advocate the legislature to change when we can hold our reorganization meeting. Back in the day when the elections used to be in April, we would have the election not that far. We could have it any time up to just 2 weeks after the election. Now we're waiting basically from November, first week in November until January 1. So the concern is there were some issues in the past with other boards where they couldn't appoint a super because it was basically a lame duck board. So the proposal is to basically put it back to the way it was in April by saying 2 weeks after the election, the board can have a reorg meeting right away. So that's on May 16th. That's the only resolution. If you have any strong opinions one way or the other on that, please shoot me an email and I will convey that to the delegates. Thank you.
Any other board business? Mr. Kaufman?
Okay, so had a very interesting evening tonight. Again, one that is for the books. So I want to ask the administrators here, if we're going to come back on May the 5th to deliberate the one-to-one initiative again, do you guys know exactly what you need to get to answer the questions that were provided here? Because there were so many mixed signals and direction resets. I want to make sure you guys know exactly what it is that you're supposed to get and the questions that and the answers you need to provide for that May 5th. And is May 5th okay for you, Mike? Can you wait that long, or do you have to have a meeting before then?
That's next week.
May 5th was the meeting for superintendent search.
I believe Mr. Poy just said, right?
I did, and I said we would also try to deal with this.
Are you going to take that action at that meeting?
Well, I thought it would be helpful to the district.
The only problem is that there's a question of whether administration is going to be present at that meeting. We have not been at the past when the superintendent search went on.
If I may, the meeting opens in terms of a public session, and we would go into closed session for the superintendent search piece of it, so that we could deal with this, we could deal with the initiative, okay, one-to-one initiative during the public session of the meeting, which would be at the start of the meeting.
To answer Mr. Kaufman's question, I believe one of the questions that was brought up was, would Apple's discount be affected if you bought less than the amount of items included in the resolution tonight? Mr. Washington was going to check on that.
Is the 4-year AppleCare available?
Is there a 4-year AppleCare warranty period available. Mr. Washington was going to check on that. I believe that we could have both those answers by the next meeting. Those are the only two questions that resonated with me.
Are there any, okay, see, because there are other, I want to make sure, because there may be flavors of this, like if it's $2,400 for this price and $2,000 for this price and $1,500 for this price, what's going to satisfy the board? And I know other questions were asked about, well, what's the inventory? What do we expect to have come back? And I know you won't, I know Reggie's not going to have, he doesn't have a crystal ball. He won't know what percentage are recyclable for the following year. I just want to make sure that we could put closure on May 5th, that we don't have deliberation again, that any questions that the board has get answered on May 5th, to best of our ability.
That's a great idea, because I was thinking the same thing as far as we were kind of all over the place. But I would like to go one step further and just say, within the next 48 hours, if we can get all our questions to Mr. Poi, so he can steer them to Mr. Washington, because I'm sure we may have other questions, and we want to get resolution to this item in a timely fashion. One of my questions right off the bat is I'd like to explore other options for buying refurbished iPads. You just said that they're going to buy our old ones, refurbish them, and resell them. Is that an option? And if so, what is the cost savings? So that's another question that you can add. I'll still email if you want. But
See, my concern, sorry.
Wait, now these questions are expanding, may I recommend that the board be directed to send the questions to you for refinement and then redirect to Mr. Washington?
Yeah. Although so far what I've heard are the same questions that I heard in the earlier discussion. It just might be that they were not, it was not clear for Mr. Washington that those questions needed to be answered. Okay, so let's do that instead of trying to deal with it tonight. If you have a specific question regarding the one-to-one initiative for Mr. Washington, please get it to me as soon as possible so that I can get it to him so that he has enough time to...
You're going to need a date. Get it to me by this date, because this way,
well, this is
Reggie knows
Monday
to move
night.
forward.
I need these by Wednesday evening at the latest, but if you can get it to me by tomorrow, that's even better. Because as soon as I get them, I will forward them to him. And if there's any question, if there's something I don't understand, I'll get back to you before forwarding it. Okay, any other board business? Mr. Sarneski?
The Middlesex County School Board meeting was originally scheduled for the 20th of May. That is moved up a week to the 27th of May. At that meeting, it will be discussed trying to remember the exact title of it. It had slipped my mind, but it has to do with internet and computer language and social media, and what repercussions that has as far as using it, how you should and should not use it as a board member. Also that evening are the presentations of certificated board members and master board members, which I am pleased to say Kathy and I will be receiving master board member awards that evening. And I invite any of these board members here to go. It's free of cost, and all you have to do is get with Mr. Gorski and he will sign you up. That's it.
Anyone else?
It's at 6:30, dinner starts, and it's at Pierre's in South Brunswick.
Anyone else? All right. Then be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Township of Monroe hereby moves to go into closed session in accordance with the Sunshine Law, Chapter 231 of Public Laws of 1975, to discuss the following subjects. Pending litigation, Kathy Kolopanovich versus Anthony Prezioso, Monroe Township Board of Education, Middlesex County. Agency reference number C13-14, OAL docket number EEC 09925-2014N. Also, to hear a report on the harassment, intimidation, and bullying from Mr. Ventrilo, as well as to deal with a personnel item on the Mill Lake principal. The discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public at such time as the need for confidentiality no longer exists. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, abstentions? How much time do you think? Half an hour, Dennis, you think?
Tops.
Okay, it's estimated that we should be no more than a half hour in closed session. Possibly we'll be back before then. The board will now resume with its public meeting. We will now go to our second public forum. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come to the microphone? Okay, seeing none, I will then close the public forum.
Mr. President, it is recommended that the Board of Education appoint Ms. Kristen McNolly to the position of Principal of Mill Lake Elementary School effective August 1, 2015 through June 30th, 2016 at an annual salary of $111,086.13 prorated. The Board President, the Interim Superintendent of Schools, and the Business Administrator Board Secretary are hereby authorized and directed to take all necessary steps to implement this action by the Board of Education.
So moved.
Okay, is there any discussion? Questions or comments by anyone on the board? Okay, Mr. Gorski, then a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Arminio?
Yes.
Mr. Braverman? Mr. Zarneski?
Yes.
Ms. DeMayo?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman? Mrs. Koloponowicz? Mr. Nostine?
Yes.
Mr. Prezioso?
Yes.
Mr. Rybeck?
Yes.
And Mr. Poi?
Yes.
Mr. Board President, motion passes. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Ms. McNolly, for her appointment as Principal of Mill Lake School.
Her in front of the camera? Because no one can step in front of the camera.
She certainly can. As a matter of fact, Kristen, why don't you just stand up so this way they can catch you on the camera? That's it. That's a good wave. I like that. That's a principal wave.
You would know.
Okay, as I announced earlier, our next meeting of the Board of Education will be on Tuesday, May the 5th at 7 p.m. here in the High School Media Center. And following that, we will have our regular monthly meeting on Wednesday, May 13th, 2015 at 7 p.m. here at Monroe Township High School. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
No, you might want to mention about the teacher awards too before that meeting for everyone.
Say it
On the
again.
13th, the teacher awards are right before that meeting. You might want to remind people, I don't know.
Yes,
Teacher of the Year,
yes. When you get to come early and have lunch with our Teachers of the Year, right?
Dinner.
Correct?
Dinner.
Yeah, dinner. That's right.
You can come for lunch.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Meeting is adjourned.